Brother Byerly is going to South Africa, and you and your wife has been called to work with another missionary in an orphanage. Is that correct? Okay. And he called me, it was a while ago. I told him he could have a meeting this summer. I forgot to pin the date he wrote down on the calendar. So that's why it's kind of sudden. Normally I would have announced it, but he called me last week and reminded me. I was like, oh, yeah, okay. So he's here this week, and I want him to present his work and give you a word of testimony. So, brother, come on.
In the Lord's house this morning, isn't it? Amen. Amen. Yeah, I'll just use this one for a second because I'm going to switch to the lapel mic when I show our video in a minute. But we are excited to be here this morning. We're excited to be with you folks and excited to be in Montana. We have been out here we were out here for about 3 weeks. And then we had to fly back to Florida for some training with our mission board. And then we got back out here Tuesday, I think, of this past week, and down in Bozeman. And so we're excited to be up this way. I've been up here once before. I've been to Glacier once before and to the Bison Range, but I was 7 years old. So I have very, very faint memories of that. My dad was a youth pastor at that time, and he brought a group up to Plains, to Clark Fork Baptist Church in Plains, and did a VBS that week. So I can remember seeing some of the bison, and I remember some of the snow in Glacier, and I remember Flathead Lake. I remember seeing the mountains and Flathead Lake. But that was a long time ago. That was about 27 years ago. So I feel a little old when I have to say that now. But we're excited to be here, excited to be back. And we're really excited about what the Lord has called us to do. And by the way, my wife always reminds me of this, about how terrible I am about introducing myself and her. So I'm Brandon Byerly, and this is my wife Maggie Byerly in the flowery dress. And you've seen Winston running around. If you didn't get a prayer card from us, just ask Winston, and he'll be glad to give you one. So, but right now he is in the containment unit there in the nursery. So, that's usually the best place for him. But we're excited about what the ministry the Lord's called us to, and what He is allowing us to do, and the ways that He has prepared us for that ministry, which I'll tell you about in just a little bit. But we're going to Port Elizabeth, South Africa, where we'll be joining with another family, the Bergies, who have been there for about 4 years, working with some orphans there. And there's a great orphan crisis in that country. And so what I'm going to do is I'll let you see our video first, and then I'll come back and I'll tell you a little bit more about all the things the Lord has been doing in the country of South Africa. Because it's amazing, even for me, to watch the video we made 1.5 years ago and just see everything that the Lord has done in the last 1.5 years, even through COVID and everything. It's just tremendous. So give me 1 second. Let me get the mic set up on this, and then we can do that.
A child lay motionless on the floor, left for dead by the people who were supposed to protect and care for them. Malnourished and covered in flies, they cling to life. Another has been placed in a garbage dumpster, thrown out like trash and abandoned. And yet another, in a bucket in the corner of a dilapidated shack with its umbilical cord still attached.
These are the true stories of children that have been rescued and given a second chance at life. Sadly, there are many more like these that have not been rescued. These children need someone to tell them of Jesus' love. If no one goes, what will their outcome be? How many more will be deserted, thrown out like trash, and left for dead? Will there be any hope for them? More so, will they ever know of the hope found in Jesus Christ?
We are the Byerlys. My name is Brandon, this is my wife Maggie, and our son Winston. I grew up in a pastor's home and was saved at a young age. When I was 18, I surrendered to preach the gospel and have been working with children and teens since 2006. Maggie and I grew up together and were later married in 2014. In 2018, God blessed us with our first child, Winston.
I was blessed to grow up in a good, godly Christian home. For as long as I can remember, I always wanted to be a nurse. After coming to Christ as a teen, I knew that my desire to be a nurse would align with the desire that God had placed in my heart to serve Him. I just didn't know how yet. Shortly after Brandon and I were married, I graduated nursing school and became a registered nurse. And then after that, I was drawn to pediatric nursing. I have had the privilege to take care of many children from lots of different backgrounds and cultures. While on our survey trip, God burdened my heart for the orphans of South Africa and opened my eyes to see how desperately they needed good health care. It was then that it became clear to me how I could use my desire to be a nurse and my desire to serve God in perfect harmony, and that was to be a nurse to the orphans in South Africa.
In 2016, Brent and Selena Berge visited our church and shared their heart for the orphans in South Africa. It wasn't until a few months later that we realized God had been working in both of our hearts to move forward in partnering with the Berges and Little Fish Ministries. South Africa is the southernmost country in Africa and has a population of 55.7 million people. It is a land of great diversity and beauty. From the rocky coastlines to its sweeping plains, there are many sights to behold. It is a beautiful country filled with breathtaking views and amazing wildlife. But sadly, South Africa also is home to much crime, sickness, and poverty. 7.2 million people are living with HIV and AIDS, making it the world leader of people affected with this disease. Limited health care and lack of education is what causes the prevalence of this disease. Many people die of treatable conditions and preventable diseases. On our survey trip in 2017, we experienced this firsthand and realized how strongly this correlated with the orphan crisis. These diseases left untreated, and the average life expectancy being 43 contributes to the number of orphans in South Africa, a staggering 5 million. Most of these children, without the guidance of parents or support that a stable living environment brings, end up turning to a life filled with gang involvement, violence, and prostitution. Though important, the greatest need in South Africa is not an answer to their health care crisis or their physical needs. The scarce number of gospel-preaching churches paired with ancestor worship and practices similar to the occult have left the land spiritually desolate. The thing they need most is the gospel of Jesus Christ and to know there is hope in Him. Brent and Selena Berge started Little Fish Ministries with the goal of reaching orphans for Jesus Christ. Maggie and I will be joining them in Port Elizabeth, South Africa, to help grow this ministry by meeting the spiritual, physical, and emotional needs of abandoned children. We will be working alongside of veteran church planting missionaries as well as national pastors. We will assist in these churches through preaching, soul winning, singing, and working in various children's ministries. It is our desire to work alongside the Berges and join the staff of Little Fish Ministries. I will be taking on the title of Assistant Director and working to help build the children's home from the ground up. Maggie will be helping meet the medical needs of the children in the home, as well as working in various facets of ministry. The Lord has used our ministry involvement and careers to prepare us for His calling. Please join us in praying that the Lord would begin doing a work in the lives of the people we come in contact with. We ask that He would make the way clear for His will to be done. We also ask for prayers while on deputation to raise the support needed to begin our ministry in South Africa. We humbly ask that you would consider committing to monthly support of our ministry.
As you can see, there is a great need in the country of South Africa. There's a lot of things that go on in relation to these children that are just, stories that you wouldn't really even tell from the pulpit. But just to give you kind of an idea of the size of South Africa, it's about 1/8 the size of the United States. And in the United States, there are around 443,000 children in the foster care system. And that's compared to that almost 5 million in the country of South Africa. And so when you think about it, how in the world could there be that many children without a home, without parents, without a stable living environment? In their system, in their culture, their system should work in theory like ours works. Where a child is taken out of a dangerous situation, taken out of a bad place, and care would be taken to look for a good home for that child. Loving parents, people that can take care of it. But what tends to happen with the amount of cases that the social workers have, what tends to happen is it's easier for them just to take that child and place it with the next of kin, or go down the line and see who's willing just to take that child, because in their culture it's more acceptable for that child to be placed with a family member, which that sounds good, right? You would want your children to go to another family member probably if something were to happen to you. But what typically happens is that child is just taken out of one bad situation and then placed right back into another bad situation. They're taken out of the homes that you saw there, out of one home in a township and placed in another. And so they're a place where they can't be cared for. They're a place where they can't be, treated like children, really. These children, they have to grow up at very young ages, and they have to fend for themselves at very young ages. You saw the pictures of the townships there. The typical homes there are usually about 10 by 10, 10 by 15 maybe. There's no electricity, no running water, no indoor facilities, nothing like that. And around 12 to 15 people will live in one of those homes at a time. So the younger children tend to be left to fend for themselves, to do for themselves, to find food for themselves and care for themselves. And a lot of times that results in them living on the street. That results in them being malnourished. In severe cases, we see instances where there's a lot of abuse that happens with these children because the parents can't take care of them, don't want them around, don't know what to do with them. The Bergies there, some of the children that they got in, they sent us a picture of them when they got them, and I messaged them back, and I was like, wow, what kind of disease is that? I've never seen anything like that before. And they said, oh, that's not a disease, those are cigarette burns. And these children were covered from head to toe in cigarette burns, so much that it looked like a skin disease. And even in more extreme cases than that, they'll try to take the lives of these children or just abandon them somewhere without any hope, with the intentions of never seeing them again, not caring whether they live or die. In South Africa, every year, around 3,500 children survive abandonment. So there's 3,500 children that are cast out that live, and they say that for every one child that survives, 2 do not. So 7,000 children perish a year because of abandonment. And when you do the math on that, it comes out to around 19 children a day that are passing away because of neglect and abuse and abandonment. While we were there in 2017, and we were able to do a lot of things. We were able to go in a lot of the state-run children's homes, and we were even able to go into the public schools and do some ministering there. But even more than that, we were able to talk with the faculty, talk with the staff, some of the principals, some of these other people. And so what we saw was something that, in the back of your mind, all along. But when you talk to these people and when you see it going on, it just kind of clicks sometimes, and you understand what the problem is. And the problem in South Africa is the same problem that we unfortunately have here in our own country as well, and that's sin. There's a big problem of sin there. When you look at when you look at South Africa's history, when you look at the cultural beliefs of these people, their religious system, if you will, it's not much of a religious system at all. They believe a lot in ancestor worship, have witch doctors, and all of that kinds of stuff. You really see where the root problem is, and you really can see where that root of sin comes from. And it's sad to see that these children are having to really pay for all of that as their parents are raised in sin, and as they have more children that are raised in sin, and it becomes a cycle. And it really is a cycle of sin that you can see, because these beliefs are passed down from generation to generation to generation. So as we saw all this, it really broke our hearts, but the Lord really burdened us, because as you saw, our testimony is, I was raised in a pastor's home. Maggie was raised in a good, godly Christian home. We don't know a time that we did not go to church. We always went to church. I had one pastor that was joking with me, and he said, "You were on drugs when you were little." And I looked at him funny. He said, "Yeah, you were drugged to church every time the doors were open." So I've always been in church. And as we saw these children, and as we saw the state they were in, that's what our desire for them is. We would love to see them have the kind of lives that we had as we grew up. And not to take and try to make Americans out of them, absolutely not. But just to give them the gospel of Jesus Christ. To give them Christ, to show them Christ at a young age, to give them some hope. Because while we can do a lot of things for them, while I can work on houses and buildings and try to give them a good place to stay, and Maggie is an excellent cook. She can cook great. She can give them food. She is an amazing nurse and is just wonderful with children. She can give them medicine. And, we could stand up here and we could make a pretty good TV commercial, right? When you see the ones about the starving kids, and they try to make you feel sorry for them, and you just want to give them money so that you can clothe them and feed them. We can do all of that, but then we wouldn't be any different than any other organization that's over there. We wouldn't be any different than the state that's, trying to take care of them. What we've got to do is we've got to get them Christ. We've got to give them some real hope. Because just feeding their bellies and clothing their bodies, that'll give them a little bit of hope for today and tomorrow, but that's going to run out. And they need something that's not going to run out. They need to know who Christ is. They need the gospel. And so we want to see them raised like that. We want to, Lord willing, see some young men be called to preach. Be able to go back into some of these townships where they were taken out of. Start some churches. See some young men and young women be soul winners, to give the gospel back out to their people. And so that's what our desire is with these children. And it's amazing to see where this ministry really started several years back with the Bergies, and to where it's progressed to now. Because when we met the Bergies in 2016, they came through our church. And our church took them on, for support. My dad's our sending pastor there. And so one of the perks of being a pastor's kid is you always get to go out to eat with the missionaries after church. And they get to tell you all the fun stories that they can't tell from the pulpit. And so we got to talk to them a lot and have some good conversations with them. And I got to see Brother Bergie's vision that God had given him for South Africa. And as he was talking to us about that, he said, I want to have land, I want to have these facilities and these types of ministries and all these things to do. And he said, but I can't do it all by myself. He said, my wife and I and our kids, we can't do all that by ourselves. He said, we've got to have some help. And he said, I'm looking for people that can do maintenance work, that can work on things, that I'm looking for people with medical knowledge and nurses that can take care. These children are coming out of homes with HIV and AIDS and tuberculosis and all of these different manners of abuse. He said, I need some medical knowledge here. And the Lord began speaking to our hearts about that. But sadly, I'm ashamed to say, we didn't really talk about it at all. I was in the middle of going through an application process with the police department back in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And I was making it through there, and then finally after about 3 months, if you don't know, the application for the police department takes forever. After about 3 months, I was nearing the end of it, but the Lord closed the door. Something happened, and it wasn't going to happen, and the Lord closed that door. And so I called Maggie, and I told her, I said, I dropped out of the police department. I told them I'm withdrawing my application. And she said, really? And I said, yeah. I said, we're supposed to go to South Africa. And she said, yeah, I know. And so the Lord was speaking to us about this, and He was burdening our hearts for these people and for what was going on there. But little did we know, and little did even Brother, and he'll tell you too, little did even Brother Bergie know, that how many doors the Lord would open in South Africa. How many different avenues would be available to give the gospel out. So once they made it there in 2017, I was able to go and help them set up their home and get ready for everything. And then Maggie was able to go with me for a few weeks later on in the year. And that's when we were able to travel around and see a lot of different things and dealing with these children and the situation there. But since then, there have been some amazing things that have happened. We've been praying for property for 4 years since the Bergies got, even I believe before they got there, they were looking for property. And last year was when the Lord provided that. And it's you say, wow, why does the Lord wait on some things like that? I have no idea. But all I can say is probably as much happened last year during COVID as happened in the years previous to that. And it's just amazing to see how the Lord worked in a country that was really shut down. I mean, a lot more closed off than our country, to the point a man was arrested for going to get formula for his baby after 9 o'clock after curfew. People were getting shot with rubber bullets. But none of that stopped the Lord at all. He provided us with almost 24 acres of land where we can begin to build these facilities for these children. Not only that, last year they were able to raise enough money for a baby haven, which will kind of be like another separate children's home, but a place where we can take in newborns and infants. So a lot of times these mothers, when they have these children, they have no idea what to do with them. They don't want them. They're shamed into keeping their children instead of putting them up for adoption or turning them into a children's home. And so that's where it comes into play, where they're literally throwing them in the trash, throwing them in the dumpster, abandoning them in the bush, just tossing them out in the wilderness for the wild animals. And I know that sounds harsh and graphic, but that's the truth about South Africa. That's the value of life in South Africa. We'll have a place where they can bring those children to us instead of abandoning them, instead of abusing them. They can bring those kids to us, and we'll have a place where we can take care of them. It'll also be a place where we can take in kids that might need an emergency care, as far as they're in a bad situation in their home. They're in a dangerous situation in their home. They can be taken out and they can be brought to us, where we can provide them with temporary care, or that usually will turn into long-term care, where we'll have them for an extended period of time. But the Lord allowed us to raise the money for that last year for this baby haven. We've got bulldozers and tractors on the property right now. They're cutting roads, they're clearing land. I think there's 2 construction crews going at one time right now, working on building projects, all that the Lord provided the funds for last year in 2020. So it's just amazing to see really just the power of our God and what He can do. Nothing slows Him down. The virus doesn't slow Him down. International borders, they don't slow Him down. He does everything in His time. And for whatever, for some reason, 2020 was a big year for Him to provide for us and for Little Fish Ministries. So we've got all of these things going on where we'll be able to take these kids in, and we want to have a Christian school as well, be able to give them a Christian education. But like I told you before, giving them the kind of life that we had, it's going to be a very personal place for them. The Bergies have adopted 4 children out of China, and they took them out of like the big group homes, where they would have the giant dormitories with hundreds of kids packed in there. And so you can really see the effect that has on a child. And so as they were burdened for these children here, the type of children's home we'll have will be like a cottage style. And it's actually something that I've seen a couple times here in the United States, but it's very popular in Africa as well, to where we'll have a certain amount of homes on the property where the staff will be able to take in children. We'll all be able to take in up to 6 children each. And so we'll have us as a family and a couple other families, and then there's also some single missionary ladies that are there as well, and they'll be able to take in some children as well. And so they'll have a home. Winston will be their brothers, And so they'll have a family. We'll be their family. And instead of just placing them in a large place and, kind of treating it like the military, they'll be raised in a home. They'll be raised in a Christian home. They'll be raised knowing that, the Lord loves them, that the Lord cares for them, that there are people out there that care for them. And so we just love the way that the Lord has designed all of this, the way that the Lord has put all of these things together, and just in the way that we're really just humbled by the way that He's using us. Because honestly, we never thought that we would be missionaries. I mean, we were happy with what we were doing. We were happy. Maybe it's dangerous when the Christian gets comfortable. We may have been a little too comfortable. In our home church with my dad being the pastor, we had a teen group that we loved working with, and then the Bergies just had to show up and come through our church and tell us about South Africa. But we're just excited about what the Lord's doing there. We're excited about the things that He is doing, about all of the ways that He has opened avenues for the gospel to get out. We can even go into public schools. We can minister in the public schools. We can go into these other the state-run children's homes, and we can minister in those. We can do Bible classes. And in all of these things, there's no restrictions on what can be taught out of God's Word. We can literally do whatever we want to do to get the gospel out to these kids. But when I say that Maggie and I, that we are really humbled about the way that God's using us, the Lord showed me a verse. And I'm not going to preach this verse, but I just wanted to read it to you because it was very encouraging to me as we were praying about how the Lord would use us in this ministry, about what He would have for us, and how. The big thing was how. It's kind of obvious for Maggie because nurses can go anywhere and do anything. They're always in high demand. But me, I grew up in a small church. Like I said, we had a small teen group and things like that. All the jobs that I was working were technical jobs. I'd worked on garage doors. I was working as my last job. I was working as a building maintenance engineer for 6 years, which sounds really good, right? You put the word engineer at the end of any title, and man, that sounds like an awesome job. So basically, I was a handyman in a 34-story building. I got to change the light bulbs and unclog the toilets and do things like that. So an engineer is not always what it's cracked up to be. But no, we loved our jobs. We loved what we were doing. But we thought, how does this translate to orphans in Africa? How does this translate to getting the gospel out to kids? In Luke chapter 5, when we find Peter, James, and John, Jesus finds them on the lakeshore, and in Luke 5, verse number 2, it says, speaking of Jesus here, it says, He saw 2 ships standing by the lake, but the fishermen were gone out of them and were washing their nets. When He found them, they were fishermen. That's all they were. He didn't find them in Bible college. He didn't find them in the synagogue. He didn't find them sitting and learning at the feet of the high priest. They were fishermen when He found them. And the Lord spoke to me in that, because if He can use fishermen if He can call these fishermen to be His disciples, then it really doesn't matter what He's taught me to do. He can use it. And because now, I can see through the years how I can tell, if I had time, I could take you all the way back to when I was in high school, maybe even before, and show you the things that the Lord allowed me to learn through different people, and the places, the jobs that He placed me in, and the people that He placed me under that taught me different things. And now He's using all of that in South Africa. And it's encouraging to know that it really doesn't matter what I have to offer Him. He can use it as long as I'm willing to offer it. He's the same way with and that's not just for me, because I wasn't a missionary when He called me to be a missionary. I was sitting right here in the pew where y'all are. I was right in the same place, working a 9-to-5 job, doing the same thing every day. But if we offer it to God, if we say, Lord, I don't think it's a lot, but if You can use it, He will. He can. And He desires to. He desires to use His people in His service. And that's very humbling to me and Maggie to think that our God would take us and the things that He has taught us through the years and use that in South Africa. We've been going for about 1.5 years now. on the deputation trail. We're at about 55% on our support level right now, which we're praising the Lord for, because we lost about 4 months worth of meetings last year due to COVID. I don't know how it was out here, but on the East Coast, it was terrible with churches. We had a really hard time getting meetings and keeping meetings, but the Lord has brought us a long way since then, and He's taught us a lot since then. And so what we're praying now is that we'll be in South Africa next year. That's the desire of our heart, is that He'll have us there next year. And we're praying that is His will, and we know He's going to get us there in His time. He's already shown us in the last several years that He does what He will in His time. We know that. You can't force His hand. And so, but if y'all would, if we could just ask you to do one thing, it would be to pray for us. If you would just pray that the Lord will get us there next year, that He'll get us there in His time, but that His time will be next year. That's what we're praying for. So, that's where our heart is. That's where we desire to be. We desire to be there with these kids. We desire to give them the gospel of Jesus Christ before it's too late, to give them a little bit of hope in an extremely dark place. So if y'all would pray along with us about that. Stop by our table. We've got some things that we brought back from South Africa that you can look at. But we've got some prayer cards there. Like I said, if you didn't get a prayer card, just ask Winston if he'll say, "Hey, can I get a prayer card?" And he'll run back there as fast as he can and get you one, and be glad to give you one of those. You can also sign up for our email. We promise we don't send you, a bunch of spam emails every day, just about one every other month or so. We don't blow your inbox up. But if you'd like to keep up with our ministry, you can do that on Facebook, or you can go on Facebook and sign up for our email, or we have a sheet in the back there that you can sign up for that as well, to keep up with our ministry. So we really thank y'all for the opportunity to be here this morning and to share the burden that God has placed on our hearts for the country of South Africa, and we just really appreciate it. And thank you, Pastor. So I've got about 10 minutes. Does anybody have a question or anything they might have? Yes?
How receptive are South Africans to the gospel?
They are very open. They are. It's actually amazing how open they are. They're very kind and polite. They like Americans. So once they figure out that you're an American and not British, then they really like you pretty good. So they really like Americans a lot. They're very open and acceptive to it. So I forgot to say this, Brother Berge started a church about 1.5 years ago. That was another thing that's ever evolving, because the initial vision was for the children's home, and the Lord just really kept burdening him about this place. And he said nobody would start a church there. And finally the Lord said, "Why don't you start a church there?" So we've got a church ministry now too that he pastors there, and it's in a place where we can minister to all people, there's so many different cultures there and groups of people where we can bring everybody in, and they're all really open to the gospel. Anybody? I think you had yours next.
Yeah, I noticed in the film that there were lions laying there on the sidewalk. Was that in the town?
Oh, those are just dogs. On the sidewalk? Oh yeah, those were just some dogs. Yeah. Well, so the sad thing about that is, with the more wealthy South African population, they'll get groups together and they'll raise money and do all this stuff, and they'll go out into the towns and they'll take these stray dogs food and water, and they'll try to care for these stray dogs, but none of them have anything to do with the children that are there roaming the streets. They don't take anything to them, but they'll care for the stray dogs that are around there.
So when you have unmarried girls that have babies, is there anything that is being done if the mother wants to stay with the baby? Or do you just take the babies?
So one ministry that we'll have is we're looking to have, what's the name? The name slips my mind. Yes, like a crisis pregnancy center, so that we can bring in the mothers or families, whoever. We can counsel them, give them instruction, help them along, and then even, say, like you said, if the mother has the baby and wants to keep it, that will be a place where they can come and we can help them out too. We can help meet because basically, now they have the baby at the hospital, they're sent home, and that's it. They have no care. A lot of the hospitals and the townships, you basically just go there to die. And so there's no care for them, no help for them. But that is one thing that we want to have, because with Maggie being a nurse, and then we have another nurse on staff who is a labor and delivery nurse. So between them, we've got a lot of knowledge on our staff for things like that. And so that's something the Lord's directing us to as well, to have something like that. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Just wondering how accessible or affordable is building supplies, and do you have access to locations?
So as far as the building supplies go, this is the crazy thing about, because when we think about Africa, I've been to a couple different places in Africa, and you see the mud huts, and you see the different people out there build. And a lot of times, you hear in churches, oh, we're going to get a group together, and we're going to go build a church or build a school, or we're going to. The crazy thing about South Africa is kind of like their system with the children. It all has to be done very legally and in order. And even with the building projects, they have to be done very legally and in order and meet certain codes, to the point where it's much more of a burden to say, oh, that church wants to come over and build a building for us. It's a lot easier to say, we're just going to raise the money for it and then let the South African people, let their construction companies build it. It's cheaper and easier, and that way we can meet all of the requirements and not get shut down or get in trouble for it. But they do a lot of block. They build a lot of things with block and tile, which are readily accessible over there and are actually very inexpensive compared to wood. Wood is very, well, I know it's expensive here now, but it's always been like that over there. So, and then medical supplies. There's somebody else over here. Yes.
How about the language?
So the language is fun. There's 3 different languages where we're at. In South Africa, there's about 11 different tribal languages, but where we're at, there's English, and then there's Afrikaans, and then the tribal language with the people in the townships is called Xhosa, and it's spelled Xhosa. And the way that you say it is you have to start off like you're calling your dog or a horse. So it's like, and that's the X. And so when you say it, it's Xhosa. And I slaughter it. I'm terrible at it. I think there's around 7 different clicks in their language. Praise the Lord, most people speak English. And the majority of the people that we'll be working with speaking, and where we have to deal a lot with the government and social workers, they all speak English. And a lot of the people in the township speak English, or at least understand English, good enough to get by. Lord willing, I really want to learn the language, though. It's not required and not a super necessity at this time, but I would love to learn the language. So y'all pray for me with that. I would really like to do that, even though I know it's going to be really hard. So, yes, sir.
Is there any support in South Africa from the white population for this kind of ministry, or do they reach out at all?
No, like I said, they're the ones who minister to the dogs. They pull their money and go buy food for the dogs. The cultures never cross at all. There's 3 culture groups there, and they never cross. The wealthier people never go into the townships for any reason at all. And the people in the townships, the only reason they come out of the townships is because they don't have jobs or anything, is if they get hired to be like a day laborer. Like somebody outside might hire them to come take care of their yard or take care of their pool, or just do some various jobs around their house and do something like that. And that's about the only time they ever come out of there. So it's a land of really about 3 different worlds that hardly ever intersect at all. Yes, sir.
So apartheid never ended?
In some people's minds, I don't think so. They live under the rule of the government, and under the new government, they still have to deal with power shutdowns, water shutoffs, and all kinds of stuff. But I think in some people's minds, not really. They still live their separate lives over here, work, have jobs, have their nice stuff, and the other people still live over here in poverty. I think really just the rulers switched is about it, but they're not really doing much for the people in the townships at all anyway. So, yeah. Yes, sir. Yes. Those are national pastors. So there's another group of missionaries that are there. They're called Project South Africa, and some of them have been there for over a decade and have planted several churches in the townships and actually raised them up. They've had a Bible school there where they've been able to teach the young men that were called to preach, and let the national pastors take over their church so they could move on and start another church in a different township. And so there are a few of those churches where we'll be able to work with those national pastors. And Lord willing, one of those might be my COSA teacher one day. We'll see Brother Lou Babalo. And so that's where that'll come into play, where we will be able to work in those other churches, because those are the only churches that we know of that give the gospel out. When I say give the gospel out, I mean not just Baptist churches. Those are the only church. I mean, they are Baptist churches, but those are the only churches that we know that actually teach God's word as it's written. Don't add anything to it. Don't take anything away from it, and teach the right way to get to heaven. There are some other groups down there, the Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses and Catholics, of course, and Hindu, and they all allow the people to migrate their religious system and just kind of merge the two together. So you can bring your ancestor worship into Catholicism, or bring your ancestor worship and your witch doctors into Jehovah's Witness, and they just say, that's fine, you can just do whatever you want to do. Probably the only ones that would be strict about it would be us, and probably the Muslims that are over there, which there's not too many of those right now, but I imagine they're pretty strict on, their converts. So, yes, sir. All right. Well, listen, church, I thank you again so much for letting us be here, and thank you, Pastor, for the time to share our burden for South Africa. And again, if you would, just please pray for us. We believe in the power. We greatly believe in the power of prayer. So thank y'all so much.
Something like that, not be burdened, I don't know. And it's just something we don't understand here. We don't see that so much. Now, if the Lord tarries the direction America is going, we might understand it. We don't see it now. And so be praying for them, and be praying that they, when you deal with a society like that that's so broken, and it's one of the things that every missionary tells me the same thing, whether it's in Ukraine, when it comes to these third world countries, whether it's working with the gypsies, whether it's working in Africa, they get a convert that's grown up there. They train them to preach. They turn the church over to them. A couple of years, it falls all apart when they're left on their own. And the problem is that sin is so ingrained into them. They don't know how to conduct themselves as a Christian. They've grown up in such a broken system, they just don't know how to live the Christian life. And raising them up from a child, you develop somebody that can reach their own people. And in time, if they can raise these kids, train them, send them out, those are the ones that will reach South Africa. And you can do a certain amount of church planting and turn it over to the nationals, but if they are not growing up in the right environment and they're exposed to that witch doctor stuff and that sin, it flaws the character at a very young age. And that's what I've been told. That's what I've been told. Now, I'm no expert. I haven't been out over there and dealt with it, but that's what the report I hear from the missionaries all the time. That's what I've heard. So be praying for them. Be praying for that work, and I'm sure they'll see souls saved. You work with children, that's the easiest time to get them saved. And that alone makes it a profitable ministry, seeing the kids get saved. But keep them in your prayers. We had the services yesterday. There is a lot of chicken left over. And we're having a fellowship afterwards. We will be having a third service. But anybody that wants to stay and fellowship with us, feel free to do so. And if not, then okay, there's chicken down there too. But I'm just kidding. But eat you some chicken, one way or the other. But anyway. Let's go ahead and close out with a song. And we'll close out with a song and some prayer, and we'll take a break.